I guess should we start with kind of a bit of the history first? Because, you know, a lot of people would be unfamiliar with the idea of inflation.
Basically, inflation turns a healthy economy into a sick one because it becomes a process of constant catch-up. You know, your wage goes up, then it's my turn later on to bargain a wage. I start to think you're getting paid more than I am, then you think I'm getting paid more than you. It makes it very difficult for people to work out how expensive things are, whose wage is higher than somebody else's, and that makes it almost impossible for an economy to function because you don't know what the cheapest sources of supply, what the cheapest kind of labour is, and what kind of job to take. And certainly when inflation reached over 25% in the 1970s, this was something that really started to wreck the way the whole economy worked. It was very difficult. In the 1980s, first of all, people tried to target the behaviour of money, and that proved difficult in the early part. Then trying to use an exchange rate as a method of bringing inflation down. In the end, we had to have a very deep recession in the early 1990s to suppress inflation. I think there are, and I think it's a function of ideas. I think there was a serious mistake in the 1970s in which people thought that, well, if we accept a bit more inflation, we can have higher employment and output in the economy. That turned out to be false. And then, of course, that mistaken idea was compounded by some bad luck in the form of the oil price increases in the 1970s. And there's a real parallel to that now, in which I think there are mistaken ideas floating around in the central banking world, compounded now by bad luck after the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
When you say mistaken ideas?
So I think the mistaken ideas are twofold, really, at present. The first is that people, I think, decided that when the pandemic hit, because output in the economy contracted, the right thing to do was to print a lot more money to stimulate spending, to try and bring demand back up. But that's not what the pandemic was about. The pandemic was about shutting down parts of the economy quite deliberately in order to prevent the spread of the disease. And that meant that if you simply print lots of money at a time when you're producing less, you've got a classic case of too much money chasing too few goods, and the result of that is inflation. And we started to see that last year in 2021. Now, I think of understandably worried about the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine on energy and food prices.